Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. Oh, I gotta click on the thing again, right? Okay, Monday, March 11th, 2019. Yes, I neglected over the weekend the one task I was supposed to give myself. Of course, I was distracted by most from the routine housework, I guess, of the show over the weekend by, well, the death of the Kagro in the Morning laptop. I think it's pretty much done. It is repairable. We still have to find out exactly how much it might cost to do that. But then we got to balance that against, whether or not it's worth investing several hundred dollars in renewing things with it's a model 2011 model MacBook Pro. So, I mean, it has lived its life. It's been a long life. It did what it was supposed to do. It seems a shame to sink so much money into a brand new one when really it serves as a backup role. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe we shouldn't trust a 2011 laptop with which will amount to, I think, a new Logic board to be the backup. I mean, you might as well just buy one that's capable of handling the show. I don't know. So anyway, some major expenses coming, but we're doing okay. I mean, it's not great. Nobody wants to spend that kind of money on anything ever if they don't have to. But the good news is, the really, truly good news is that we were, I think, well advised earlier during one of the previous episodes of Laptop Trouble to go and get this Mac Mini that is dedicated to broadcasting the show. So the fact that the laptop that used to run the show exclusively is now dead doesn't mean we're off the air. The good news is the Mac Mini runs everything. But, I got used to having the laptop in front of me to do the reading off of and to do research during the show and not bother the machine that's actually streaming. So I think it makes sense to have a backup, and we'll be getting that, I guess, in place soon. Always takes me a while to get around to saying, all right, I commit to X amount of dollars, even if it's $700 for a repair versus now looks like it's going to be about $3,000 for the newest type of laptops with the souped up memory and processor so that it's actually capable of running the show in case there's anything that ever goes wrong with the Mac Mini. But I think we've done a decent job, at least in getting things backed up so that, cross my fingers here, and I guess I should be knocking on some wood and anything else that I can do to assure these computers we trust them and don't worry about it, and we're going to be okay. But it's time to get a new one in here sooner rather than later, and that took up an awful lot of time, and it's happening everywhere. I think maybe I'm giving off electromagnetic pulses and ruining all the circuit boards in the house. The home computer, that is the one that does all the personal work, also probably on its way out. The kids are complaining that their computers are old and they don't keep up with the new games. And I don't know. We can't get everybody a new computer at the same time, so I have to space it out a little bit. All right, time to catch up with the actual news, things that are actually happening. And there's plenty out there, and Greg has already assembled his bunch of stories, his raft of stories, and we can review those in a few minutes. The weekend was relatively quiet. I guess they shipped the president off to Pervalago to play some golf, and he ironically, or maybe even unironically, chose the Jupiter, Florida golf course location for his weekend playing. And it occurred to me, by the way, that even as much as we've gotten used to the idea of his going and playing golf at every opportunity, and the fact that he's later photographed in the clubhouse, usually a disheveled mess, which leads you to believe that he might have been out there playing golf, it occurs to me that this is the, I don't know how many times he's been to the Jupiter golf course, but people who keep count of how many times he's been to one of his golf courses and noting that it's, I don't know, we're like in 100 150 to 170 plus, I think, in terms of days he's gone off to the golf course. And I'm reminded every once in a while that no one has ever been allowed to see him play golf. And given how skeptical I am of signed documents or pronouncements that documents are forthcoming from Trump himself or any of his representatives, it occurs to me that maybe I should be a little bit skeptical about what he's doing during these 4-hour blocks that the press is not allowed to see him. Nobody ever verifies that he's playing golf. They continue to deny that he's playing golf. All I know is he comes back a disheveled mess after spending 4 hours in Jupiter, Florida. But, I don't know what else to think. There's nothing else for an old perv like Donald Trump to do for a couple hours in Jupiter, Florida anymore, I guess. I'm sure there are other places you could go. But it was a wild weekend in terms of developments with this Cindy Yang person who turned out to be the founder of this chain of, I guess they call them massage parlors, at which Robert Kraft was busted, among others, and I guess she's a regular denizen of Mar-a-Lago. Who could possibly have guessed that where Jeffrey Epstein's hanging out and Robert Kraft is hanging out, there would also be this massage parlor maven hanging out and selling access to, pretty much anyone who will pay who's from China. And advertising on her Facebook page with photos of herself and prominent Republicans and members of the Trump family. I can get you this close to in exchange for money. Nothing wrong with that, I'm sure. Greg Dworkin, you probably missed the whole thing and you want to talk about polls.
Well, I didn't miss the whole thing, and I want to talk about polls. But,
okay, you never miss.
There was Mother Jones.
Yes,
had a couple of articles about Li Yang, who goes by Cindy.
Yeah,
they describe her as the Florida massage parlor entrepreneur. Now, she had sold the chain that Robert Kraft was busted at. Yeah. But she's been to the 2016 Republican National Convention.
Yeah.
She was with Donald Trump watching the Super Bowl. She's got selfies with the entire Trump family.
Yeah.
And then Mother Jones had an article over the weekend. The massage parlor owner peddling access to Trump has ties to Chinese government-linked groups. Which is the really interesting thing. So if you're going to pay her to have a group of Chinese business executives hang out at Mar-a-Lago,
yes,
it does raise the question of, accessibility to Trump, of course, but, also, and I have to whisper this to make sure that it has the proper import, spying.
What? Has anybody ever thought about spying going on at Mar-a-Lago?
Going to another country and trying to check out what's going on. I mean, the thing I love about it is that I am certain without checking that Cindy Yang's Florida business cohort was extremely vetted before allowing access to Mar-a-Lago.
Totally vetted. They don't know who she is. They don't know who she's bringing in there. They're vetted.
But she does. She knows who she's bringing in there.
Yes, I understand she's associated with a group of Chinese-American business people, a group actually run by the Communist Party of China that's aimed at as they say, the peaceful reunification of China. That is to say, the reabsorption of Taiwan. I don't know how much success they've had or whether any of them have had any beautiful chocolate cake served to them at Mar-a-Lago, but everybody's been sure the place is
a Miami-based nonprofit that promotes, quote, economic and cultural exchange, end quote, between China and the West in coordination with senior Chinese leaders in the U.S.
That's so funny. Slavery is hilarious to me, apparently. Okay.
Well, yeah.
I can't be laughing at it. But, I mean, it's a very dangerous situation. And even, well before this situation came to light, people have been talking about the danger of spying at Mar-a-Lago in particular, by the Chinese in particular, for a very long time.
They have. And also that Mar-a-Lago isn't exactly the most secure place in the world, and that Trump's friends can sort of wander over and watch him, plan out, let's say, North Korean, delegation, strategy. because he does it on the table in a really loud voice. Everybody can hear it.
Yes, and backlit by notorious spy Mike Flynn's Chinese bugged cell phone.
Right. Now, to be fair.
Oh, sorry.
Right, there's no direct evidence.
Fair. Time for fairness.
That
yes.
Cindy Yang is a spy or works with spies or recruits spies, or that the people buying access are spies. And one does not want to have bad thoughts and accuse people of things just because, let's say, they happen to be, from a particular country.
Oh, they're like spies.
If you did
we
that,
all like spies.
if you accused people of just being bad because of where they're from,
no, you can't.
You would be Jeanine Pirro on Fox News talking about Ilhan Omar's, hijab, and
yes.
that the fact that she wears one means that she can't support the Constitution. We're not saying that.
No, we're not.
But at the same time,
might be, but we're not.
Well, Cindy Yang is associated with a group that was busted for soliciting prostitution.
Yes, there is that.
That's fact.
And and I mean, there's a lot of kinds of spying too. I mean, industrial espionage is not much more fun to have the president involved in than state spycraft. And
let's just say it raises questions.
It does, and there are questions that have been raised for a long time, not just about Chinese visitors, obviously, but no one knows who goes to Mar-a-Lago. No one vets. No one. And no one controls access to the president either, and he demands it that way, maybe because it's good for him.
It's a big major problem on various and sundry places, on college campuses, on because a lot of the overseas rich countries, be it Saudi Arabia or China, send a lot of their students to some of the best and most expensive universities in the U.S., and those universities are more than happy to take the money.
Yes.
Who comes? And there's one group of students watch another group of students. This has been something of a bit of a scandal on certain college campuses. And it's, it just raises a whole major issue that, again, one has to be fair about it, because you don't want to, get the feeling that you don't trust somebody just because of where they're from. But this is weird. This whole Cindy Yang story is just really bizarre.
Yeah, and it gets weirder every minute, and she's been trying desperately to erase her online footprint, but you can't do that. Chinese spies or no, it's almost impossible to get rid of it all.
Right.
It's been very strange.
Speaking of erasing your footprint and Fox News and being weird, then there's Tucker Carlson.
Yes. Right. He's also had a bad weekend.
He has. Media Matters did a little bit of digging and found some odd things that he said on a radio show.
Yes, that's very general.
And as he puts it, as Tucker puts it, Media Matters caught me saying something naughty on a radio show more than a decade ago.
No.
And rather than express the usual ritual contrition, how about this? I'm on television every weeknight, live for an hour. If you want to know what I think, you can watch. Yep. Anybody who disagrees with my views is welcome to come on and explain why.
Yeah, or stay here and explain why. You don't
or
have
not
to go
on at all. David
right.
Ciccolini, who's a Rhode Island congressman, said, Tucker, I've never had a problem going on your show before, but this is bullshit. I'm done. Yeah,
I mean, it's bad stuff. I saw some of the clips of with a transcript of various things he said, and I mean, he just goes from one topic to another.
Yeah, all horrible. Good. Well, one of the ones that people are focusing on is the one where he was defending Warren Jeff and child rape and marriage.
Yeah, that's a tough one, and it didn't work out real well for Milo. What's his name?
Milo
Yiannopoulos.
Yeah. So he's Carlson was just saying, hey, some rapes are just worse than other rapes,
Yeah, legitimate ones, I guess. He's been horrible for a long time on a lot of subjects, and rape's not a good one to add to the pile.
Right. Well, I'll just throw in this Frank Conniff tweet, which I thought kind of summed it all up. He said, the real shame would be if Tucker Carlson's defense of child rape diminished the fine work he does on behalf of white supremacy.
Yes. Right. Well, it would be a terrible disservice, I think, to the people who pay him to work for white supremacy. They'll be upset that they don't get top billing anymore.
Right. So, this all goes into the context of the Democrats did not accept a chance to do a Democratic primary debate on Fox News.
I see. Oh, okay.
They said something about the channel being a little off.
Yes.
And a lot of mainstream reporters rose to Shep Smith and the defense of others, one or two.
Right.
Brett Baier, maybe, sorta, kinda, and it really got to the point where, hey, some of our colleagues work there. Well, I know you're into jobs and the job program. I get that. But the whole channel really is a propaganda outlet, which, by the way, sells all this other stuff, including the Jeanine Pirros and Tucker Carlsons of the world.
Yes.
And so this is just solidified for me, this discussion with Tucker Carlson, about Jeanine Pirro, about why it's fine not to go on Fox News.
Yeah.
I get the point that you're trying to reach an audience, but the fact is the audience that you would reach has no interest in what you're saying.
Yes. Well, certainly the part that takes Jeanine Pirro and Tucker Carlson seriously. And then there are probably 6 people, who might otherwise not be reached, but I understand they have, those of them who have televisions, that's what puts them in the audience, are able to change the channel. And if they're interested in politics and debates, will find the one channel that has it.
Right. Now, for the primaries.
I never really understood that.
It's only going to be on one channel at a time. For the general debates, of course, they'll be on all channels.
Yeah, right. So there's no problem there. But I mean, if you boycott Fox for the primaries and it's on CNN and people are interested, they will simply turn their televisions to CNN. There's nobody out there who says, I will watch only what's on Fox. If it's not on Fox, it doesn't exist and is gettable.
Now, I don't have this in front of me, but somehow I vaguely remember the Republicans pulling debates from MSNBC.
Yes, they did. That I have seen tweeted. I don't even understand the whole thing. Democrats have pulled them from Fox before, and it's been fine.
Right.
So what's the problem?
I don't get it.
I thought we settled this 10 years ago.
I thought so. I don't get the whole thing. I don't understand why they were considering it, and I don't understand why it's a big deal to not consider it now. I think the mistake was considering it in the first place.
Yeah, well, you put new people in because you got to have new people, because if you have old people, they're terrible and it's establishment and blah, blah, blah. And then the old people are the only ones who remember, it's not a problem to boycott Fox for primary debates. That's what you should be doing. But they're all out now because something, I don't know. Green Deal, I guess. I have no idea.
I guess. I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Anyway, let's debate some primaries.
We hate old people here. Yeah, okay.
We do. It's
I'm a self-hating old person.
The older I get, the more I hate us.
Exactly. Okay.
But we do have a Democratic field. It's large. It's relatively unknown.
Yes.
It's mostly looked on favorably. Mostly. Maybe some people aren't as well known.
True.
There are some people that maybe Democrats don't like. Nate Silver actually put together a very helpful list because Ann Seltzer did some polling in Iowa this weekend in the Des Moines Register, and that's always of interest. Yes. As Jeff Greenfield properly pointed out, you can't pay too much attention to these early polls. A lot of this is name recognition. Jeff Greenfield tweeted, Every time a way too early, meaningless Iowa, New Hampshire poll comes out, the story should end with the scene from Meatballs where Bill Murray leads the chant, it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter.
See? Right.
And it's true. But here are some things that you can get, as helpfully put together by Nate Silver. Okay?
All right.
First of all, Joe Biden was slightly in the lead, followed by Bernie, and then a gap for Harris and Warren after that. But look at their favorability scores. Biden has a favorability score among Democratic primary voters in Iowa, 76.4, which is up from March. Excuse me, it's 75.4 in March, which was 76.4 in December.
Down from December, but by noise amounts.
Do you have that particular tweet in front of you?
I think I do, yeah.
Name recognition for Biden, of course, is in the 96-97% range.
Yes. How did it go down? That's crazy. That's just noise, I guess, right?
The second
people forgot him.
favorable candidate is Kamala Harris.
Favorability.
Who comes in at 71.3.
Right.
But her name recognition is only at 67%. So a lot of people don't know her yet. The fact that she's trailing Biden and Bernie at this particular point, some of that may be name recognition. Bernie's very favorable. He's at 67.8, behind Biden and Harris, behind Beto O'Rourke. His name recognition is up at 96%. But the Harrises and the O'Rourkes of the world are in the 60s for name recognition, so they have room to grow. And that's really the point that I wanted to make there. Some of the Democrats are just completely unknown, like Jay Inslee, who, by the way, over the weekend said that he's all out for getting rid of the filibuster, because how else are you going to save the planet?
I don't know.
Inslee comes in at a 57.8 favorability, but his name recognition is only 26%.
Yeah, that's low. I mean,
Pete Buttigieg is at 28% recognition, and that's pretty low.
Yeah.
Now, a guy that everybody knows and everybody hates would be Howard Schultz. He's at 58% name recognition, and his favorability score is 24.
Right. Well, everyone loved his work on Peanuts.
Well, he came to South by Southwest over the weekend, and pretty much everybody hated him. Dave Weigel was there and said that the crowd was like totally flat. They didn't applaud anything. All his applause lines, they just sort of stood there and did a Mike Pence, in Europe, right? And just were silent. So it was really kind of interesting.
I guess there's a theory in which you could say, oh, sure, well, Starbucks, popular, coffee, South by Southwest, people will love him. But no, they heard of him.
Amy Klobuchar, by the way, had a decline in favorability. While her name recognition went up from 46 to 58, her favorability went from 70 to 62.
That's
those stories about her mistreating staff have resonated a bit.
They have, it appears. I assume that's what did it. It's a good guess.
So that's some of the stuff you can get from it. You can't tell who's ahead.
Yes.
But you get a sense a little bit about those sorts of things.
Yes.
And also you get a sense of what people care about. For example.
Yeah.
Okay. For Sahil Kapoor pointed out, the issues that Iowa Democratic voters care a lot about: healthcare, 81%; climate change, 80%; income inequality, 67%; healthcare over income inequality by a significant amount there; and immigration at 57%; race relations at 57%. So healthcare and climate change top the list for Democrats. That's pretty good for climate change.
Yeah. Well done there. They've played it well.
Right. And then Dave Weigel noted 2 data points that rival Democrats definitely noticed about these Iowa polls, rivals of the frontrunners. 31% of Iowa Democrats say Biden's time has passed, and 43% say that of Sanders.
Okay.
So other things in the poll, of course, are I want lower taxes but more services. I want a new face who nonetheless has considerable governing experience.
Okay. Well, I'll get on that for you. Yeah, I'll mix one up in the lab.
I want the perfect candidate.
Oh, well, why not? At this stage, why not hold out for a perfect?
Right. So anyway, those are all interesting. There's Michigan polling out from Emerson, and they've got Biden at 40, Bernie at 23, Kamala Harris 12, Elizabeth Warren 11. So the polls basically are telling us that if you're going by name recognition, Biden and Sanders are best known. Harris and Warren are the next tier, who do okay, even though they're not that known. And then there's everybody else. And the everybody else haven't broken out at this particular point in time. Yeah.
And I think there's a little separation among the everyone else's, obviously, from everyone else who, I understand. That's a congressman, or that's someone else. And then there's that's not somebody who's ever been in politics, and that's why you never heard of him.
Right. And here's, another interesting observation from the Emerson poll, which I think is very similar in the Des Moines Register poll of Iowa, Emerson being Michigan. When Biden voters are asked who their second choice would be, let's say Biden doesn't run.
I see.
Bernie Sanders received 42, Kamala Harris 23, and Elizabeth Warren at 18.
Huh.
Now,
Okay.
You could argue that Bernie's platform and what he's running about is different than Joe Biden's. You could say that.
There's room for that, I think, sure.
And yet, Bernie inherits most of Biden's voters.
Huh.
So why is that? Well, again, name recognition.
That's not really any other possibility, quite honestly.
Right. In Michigan, Bernie leads the 18 to 29-year-olds over Biden 32 to 27, actually closer than I thought it was going to be. A lot of the younger voters don't really know that much about Biden and his old past and his baggage and his history, and they may not care, actually.
It could be, yes. That's not widely known because it's not remembered because they were
us oldsters remember it.
Yes, right. Whole cohort of actual, honest-to-God, legal-age voters who have no idea that he was a senator, for that matter, or that he ran for president in the 80s or whatever. But okay, right. The last thing is what they remember the best.
Right. Back when Joe Biden was vice president. That was so long ago that Tucker Carlson was saying all sorts of odd things.
Yeah, wearing a bow tie.
That's how long ago that was.
And saying, that's true. It was a while ago. But it also means Tucker Carlson has been horrible for a very long time.
Well, so should you pay attention to one but not the other? I don't know.
No. You got room for both. Okay. All right, well, we're up against our first break, but not quite to the music stage here. Just a few seconds.
Right, but, in New Hampshire, Bernie's doing quite well. Warren, not so much. I think overall Warren has been a little bit disappointing in terms of money raised and where she is in the polls and positioning, even though she probably has the most solid platform.
Yes, well, she likes to think those things through, and I guess she took such a long time developing and perfecting her platform that some people say
I just thought I'd point that out.
Right. Well, they certainly it's difficult. Although I don't know what else you look at this early in the race, but that's why I hate these early stages.
Name recognition.
Yes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We are still with Greg Dworkin, still rounding up our raft of stories. Are we still in the polling section, or are we moving?
No, that pretty much just wanted to give you a sense of where things stand there. But the other part of that story, I suppose, and it's a longish story, but you can find plenty of articles. I'll give you some examples.
Okay.
This is in the San Francisco Chronicle. Dianne Feinstein and Kamala Harris's contrasts expose broader shift among Democrats. Two prominent women in the Senate. They both were born and made their careers in California, especially the Bay Area. 9 times out of 10, they vote the same way, but they exemplify a growing divide among Democrats over the direction the party should take. This is one of those Dems in disarray, TM, trademark kind of stories. Senator Dianne Feinstein is a barrier-breaking politician with a storied career and several substantial laws to her name, but she's increasingly finding herself at odds with an activist wing of the party frustrated with her attachment to compromise and bipartisanship, as exemplified, I suppose, by that whole story about eco-activists talking to her in the office. And then Kamala Harris is running for president after just 2 years in Washington and a lengthy career in California as a prosecutor. She's embraced the progressive posture, positioning herself as a fighter against the Trump administration. The two are respectful. They're rarely in conflict. See that? Democrats in disarray, but they're rarely in conflict.
Right.
But their distinct approaches to the job speak to a growing clash of ideas within the party on the best way forward. Maybe another way to put it is that Kamala Harris is active on social media and Dianne Feinstein is not.
That's certainly a symptom of it. And it may help define. It's more than a symptom. It may help define the not only the differences between them, but to give the media a reason to exacerbate the differences. They just said they get along, they're respectful, they're rarely in conflict, but it looks like they're in conflict because someone is on social media and someone's not.
Right, pretty much.
And they can't be the same if they're not on the same platforms.
This one is Jonathan Martin and Sidney Ember writing in the New York Times. Bernie Sanders-style politics are defining the 2020 race, unnerving moderates. And then they start with a thing that's wrong. The sharp left turn in the Democratic Party, which is not a left turn at all.
I see. Yes, all right.
That's a truth sandwich there. You have to. You can't just repeat the lie. The rise of progressive presidential candidates are unnerving moderate Democrats who increasingly fear that the party could fritter away its chances of beating President Trump in 2020 by careening off a liberal cliff. Oh, this sounds so familiar, doesn't it?
Well, it's scary, but
Dems in disarray and unnamed people discussing this with us say that, oh my gosh, Democratic consultants who weren't hired by the candidates, are saying, oh my gosh, what's happening to our party?
Right. And
2 months into the presidential campaign, the leading Democratic contenders have largely broken with consensus-driven politics. What consensus-driven politics?
I see.
What are they talking about?
Right.
And embrace leftist ideas on healthcare, taxes, and the environment and Middle East policy. That would, oh dear, if Middle East policy. They're not going along with moving the embassy to Jerusalem that most people didn't want to do, except that the Trump administration did it anyway. So that's breaking with consensus.
That's policy.
Led by Bernie Sanders of Vermont, a Democratic socialist who is the top candidate of the race at this early stage, many vocal leaders in the party are choosing to draw lessons from liberal victories in 2018 rather than the party's breakthroughs in moderate suburban battlegrounds. And they're saying that because they're saying that. I'm not sure why they're saying that.
I don't know. It's just that's how you're right.
It's really not a leftist agenda. It's a popular agenda.
Yes.
And they can't get it through their head. So, and my comment about that, which I put on Twitter, is the trouble with Washington is the Republicans are so far right, they think the center is far left.
Yeah.
And that far left, insult is something that they will use at every turn. Mitch McConnell uses it with every center.
Sure.
The Democrats want people to be able to vote. This far left idea is something that I won't allow to come to a vote on the Senate floor.
Right.
Well, that doesn't make it a far left idea just because you guys don't like it.
Yeah. Familiar tactic. And let's see, when did this happen? I did see a tweet over the weekend, and I think it might have been, Robert Reich saying something we know here. For over 80 years, Republicans have used the term socialist, as opposed to far left, but same thing in their minds, used the term socialist to attack every Democratic program that's become essential to the well-being of Americans. The tweet is illustrated by two pins, political, like lapel pins, essentially, that you would wear during a campaign. The first one says, "Say no to socialism. Tell FDR no Social Security." And there's a little Republican elephant at the bottom. And then another one that says, "Say no to socialism. Tell LBJ no Medicare," with a little elephant at the bottom. I mean, even the format of the button is the same. And not to mention the exact same wording. They swapped FDR for LBJ and swapped Social Security for Medicare. And those are 30 to 35 years apart. And it's 50 plus years since the Medicare one, and still with the socialism.
Right. And I was just looking up FDR buttons because I'm always fond of them. Here's one that says Third International, third term.
I see. Yes.
Right. See, you get the picture there.
Yeah.
Right.
So, right. I mean, those are ridiculous things. We've discussed them in the past, long past in this show. I have somewhere my ancient document of all the attacks launched against the Clinton administration health care proposal.
Exactly.
That never got off the ground, and course, how they used the same
We also
attacks.
have one of my other favorite FDR buttons, the one that simply says, "We don't like Eleanor either."
Oh. Okay, boy.
Right? You get the impression.
It's supposed to be off limits because tradition, right?
Right. On the other hand, the Roosevelt people had their own button, which I think kind of summarizes the situation, as the New York Times was unable to, which says Wilkie for the millionaires, Roosevelt for the millions.
Yes. Alongside the famous anti-prohibition "We Want Beer" buttons.
Right. Always that. Or repeat with Roosevelt or repent with Wilkie. Whatever. You get the idea.
Yes.
But the whole point of all of that is that some of these ideas are simply popular. That's the only way you could describe them. They're popular. And that doesn't make them leftist because they're popular. And one of the reasons that the whole thing about, it's socialism isn't going to work is because these ideas are popular.
Yes.
Medicare is socialism. We're still on that one. Yeah, well, okay. Good luck.
Yeah.
You want to take it away? Go
take
tell
your
Lotus
government
that.
hands off my socialism.
Yeah, pretty much. So, that's all a part and parcel of what's going to happen. So you can predict that reporters will sit down like at South by Southwest and say, "Are you a capitalist?" And Elizabeth Warren will say yes.
Okay.
And that's how she's trying to distinguish herself from Bernie, who would say he's a democratic socialist and proud of it, just as Alexandria Ocasio would say that. What does that mean?
I don't know.
AOC isn't running for president, so it didn't mean much of anything. And socialism these days is like neoliberals. I mean, they are terms that actually mean something, but not by the people who use them. The people who use them are just using them as insults.
Yes. Well.
Anyway, Rachel Bittkoffer, who's a political scientist and pollster, saw my tweet about trouble with Washington as the Republicans are so far right that they think the center is left. And she said, well, yes, this is true for the electorate as well. The electorate hasn't changed much in their preferences, but the GOP has moved so far from the center, it's created the impression the electorate's moving left. So working on an article for this right now, and I hope she posts that soon, and we'll be able to look at that. But that's what's happened. The GOP has gone so far right, they make the center look different to people. And the people covering this just don't totally get that, or for whatever reason don't feel like they can express that when they write, because that would be unfair to the Republicans.
We need to introduce them to political special relativity.
Yeah, I suppose. So, again, that's the background for all this. By the way, there was some very funny Marco Rubio tweet and responses over the weekend.
Yes.
I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Rubio was trying to gin up support for overthrowing Maduro in Venezuela. By the way,
good weekend
a lot
activity.
of those aid caravans that burst into fire apparently were accidentally set on fire by the Molotov cocktails of the protesters. And they weren't set on fire by Maduro forces.
Okay. Yes, I saw that there was some doubt about the
New York
initial
Times
story.
has some footage about that. So
yes, although I did see people complaining, because the Times said, oh, by the way, the initial story, there's some doubt about this initial story that the government had set these things on fire, but that story, somehow was popularized by the mainstream media. What you mean?
Well, by yourselves, you mean, right. I am not a Maduro supporter. I don't like him. I don't like the idea of what's going on there.
I would have
but I also don't like the idea of John Bolton and Mike Pence trying to gin up, war fever. I think that's kind of bad. So Marco Rubio, who was one of the agitators, in a now deleted tweet, wrote, "Today, another transformer explosion at the German dam in Bolivar State, which caused another massive blackout. The result? Critically ill patients have died, the Caracas metro remains out of service, and few, if any, flights have arrived at or departed from Caracas in over 20 hours. Now, where did he get the information about the German dam in Bolivar State causing another massive blackout? It turns out, in response, a fellow tweets, Senator Marco Rubio, an important transformer exploded in Bolivar, and that in part again collapsed the Venezuelan electric system. However, it was not in a dam, much less German. My name is German Dam. I'm one of the journalists who published the information." And Rubio was pretty embarrassed about that, and he's deleted the tweet.
Okay. It puts me in mind of now I should have done this last night. I should have started a Twitter account as German Dam, but with a picture of a dam. But I mean, not his. And with a picture
real
of a dam.
German dam.
Yeah, like every time somebody says a snake escaped from the Bronx Zoo, they get a they get a thing.
They
And
get a
no,
whole
you don't understand. I'm the reporter who covered the story. My name is Bronx Zoo Snake. Really?
Right, exactly.
That's why. So I guess German Hermann. I guess with the accent mark. Dam. I don't know, but okay. I probably would have made a similar mistake if you said something to me and just forgot the accent mark, German dam. Like, okay, but what's a German dam doing in Venezuela? Right. Oh, well, it's named after Germany. Or I don't know. What? Why? Did they built it? I don't know. That's the name of the area. I could have made that mistake, I guess. But
well, it's one of those.
But I wouldn't have
put it in the book chapter about trying to gin a boar and looking foolish.
I guess so. I don't know that I would have tweeted about it. I would have made that reading error and said, a German dam blew up. Well, I wouldn't have said that we need to invade because of it.
Well, I don't know. Everything. If you're John Bolton,
yes,
everything is a reason to invade.
Right. Certainly. That mustache is a German
so we have
dam.
that going on.
Okay.
Let's see. We have this crowd groans at South by Southwest. This is a tweet from Waleed Shahid. Crowd groans at South by Southwest when Howard Schultz says, "Look at Venezuela if you want to see socialism in practice." And the crowd groans, and he says, "You don't like that?" It just gives you an idea of how things were going there.
I guess.
Right. So Jeet here points out a pro tip for centrists: red baiting by citing Venezuela or the USSR doesn't really convince anybody. The right already believes it, and everybody else can see it for the crock it is.
Yeah. Well, okay. Venezuela. And honestly, you tell people in this country, look at Venezuela. Most people say, I have not seen anything in Venezuela. What are you talking about? Even if you know the story of what's going on politically, what do I know about what's happening in Venezuela? What the conditions are like on the ground in Venezuela? Nothing. And I try to read.
Two more primary items.
Useless trope. Yes. Okay.
Cookies, lightning round here.
Right.
Alex Seiswell points out that Julian Castro was asked by Lydia Polgreen, why not stay in Texas and run here instead of for president? He had a great answer. Okay. He says, first of all, he has a national vision and experience in federal government. And he says, by the way, there's two of us, and his brother's considering running. So we got you covered.
Yeah, okay. So it's a team. It's a brother act.
Right. So I thought that was pretty funny. And then Courtney Gross on Twitter says, Bill de Blasio says he will decide on whether to run for 2020 sooner rather than later.
Okay.
And my Republican friend Evan Siegfried says that's really unfair of de Blasio to tease his supporter like that.
Yes. Okay. Well.
Which is about right.
Pretty much. Okay. Well, the supporter is in relatively good health and can wait, or no. Okay.
Finally, on a more serious note, one of the things that's going to happen this week is another sentence for Paul Manafort.
Okay.
The other judge
right
gets to weigh in. And this is a piece from Ken White, Popat on Twitter. 6 reasons Paul Manafort got off so lightly. The criminal justice system works at every stage and every level to give chances to people like Manafort. And so it's okay to criticize American criminal justice. He makes the point, don't pick on the judge. It's the justice system. Ellis, is whatever. He may be a crank. That's not what Ken White said. I don't know. For all I know, he may have to appear before Ellis, but I'm saying it. But he says the American criminal justice system works at every stage and every level to give chances to people like Manafort and deny them to poorer people. Okay. First of all, there can't be a sentence without an investigation, and who you decide to investigate is the whole game there.
Yes. All right.
Right? Which is one of the reasons so few people involved in the 2008 Wall Street debacle went to jail. We've said this for a long time. Obama's biggest mistake was not jailing more banksters.
Yes.
Right? But prosecutors have enormous power over who goes to jail and for how long. Congress has given Ellis the power to give people like Manafort a break. The U.S. sentencing guidelines treat some crimes more harshly than others, and though unlike mandatory minimums, they're only recommendations, not strictures, and money drives cases. So if you get a great defense attorney, you're in good shape there.
Yeah.
And sixth and finally, judges are indeed human. Racism and bias of every sort play a role in the system, but it's too simplistic to say the problem is that particular judges are racist. The problem is that judges give breaks to people for whom they can identify. People whose humanity they recognize. We're wired to identify with people like us. Judges, particularly federal judges, tend to come from backgrounds closer to Manafort's than the average drug dealers. So the system isn't broken because Manafort got 4 years rather than the 19 recommendation that the sentencing guidelines spat out. The system's broken because other people get the long sentence because other poorer and often darker people don't get the same chances. Right. It's broken at every level. In obvious and obscure ways, blaming the injustice on a single judge like Ellis is an oversimplified evasion of the problem. I thought that was pretty good. And a good reminder, and by the way, he could get 7 years or maybe even as much as 10, although probably 7. I'm thinking Judge Jackson is not going to use Ellis's ridiculous sentencing as grounds for what she does. I think she's going to try to be judgmental and objective. And I think if she was going to give him 7 anyway, she's going to give him 7.
Yes.
And if she was going to give him 10, then she's going to give him 10. But it's not because of what Ellis did.
Yeah, I don't think she's going to want to allow herself to take that into consideration. It only caused problems for her.
Yeah, the other thing that's going to come up this week, I believe, time is running out on the vote for or against Trump on the wall situation that the Senate is in.
Right.
And we know that there's 4 Republicans already voting against Trump by voting for the measure to sustain whatever the House did.
Yes.
I'm guessing it's going to be double digits.
All right.
In the end, I think they'll get 10 votes.
Once the German dam breaks, all the Germans come through.
Yeah. So I have to ask German Dam what he thinks about that prediction.
Yeah. Is he related to Jean-Claude Van Damme?
I don't know.
He's not German.
I don't know. But he's not,
Belgian.
Yeah. Speaking of different languages, I learned that the Pete Buttigieg is of Maltese origin, and that's where that name comes from.
I would not.
Which is related to Arabic, but not quite.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Maltese. Okay. I had no.
Yeah, I think it translates to Pete, father of chickens, and I think I actually saw that on Twitter. I don't know. I can't check it. I don't speak Arabic, but apparently yes.
Wow. Okay. I mean, nothing about the spelling of the name or pronunciation made me think Malta, but
nor I. But that's why I just mentioned this. I thought it's interesting.
Right.
And then tomorrow,
Maltese
in Britain, there's another Brexit vote for Theresa May, which presumably she'll lose
again.
And I'm beginning to think this Brexit thing might not have been a good idea.
Oh yeah, well, that seems to be the case. They're having a tremendous problem with businesses having to flee the country.
Too bad there's no organized opposition party who could say, why don't we just have another referendum?
And there really isn't.
I mean, they've said it.
Really
they're not an organized party.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious to see how that comes out. I've been, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. It just, I throw my hands in the air and say, well, I don't know. Britain might collapse. See how it goes. Mm-hmm. I don't live there.
Anyway, with that, things to watch for. They're all important. I think we need to spend a little bit more time in general as Americans looking at what goes on in Europe and outside our United States. And I think that's how you make America great again.
Oh.
Take care, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
All right. Very good. Thanks, Greg. Good start. We have plenty to talk about. Yes, let's see. There was some early mention. I guess I'll give a little more attention to Jeanine Pirro, just to try to develop some thoughts I had earlier this morning, some of which are on Twitter. That's what the show is about, me figuring out live what do I think about various things and trying to keep up. But yeah, Jeanine Pirro, I don't watch the show, and I don't think I even watched the clip. I may have seen I probably, or maybe I watched it with the sound off. But here's the clip that or the tweet that Greg collected for it. Oh, and it's got the audio on it. But Fox host Jeanine Pirro says that Ilhan Omar's hijab, the headscarf, may mean that she's against the Constitution, which is amazing. I have, and this is John Whitehouse's tweet here from Media Matters, and I don't even think he simplified what was going on. I don't know for sure, and I guess I ought to really just listen to the clip, and it's 49 seconds. But I could absolutely see that they just spit out something as stupid a formulation as, well, that hijab means. What does that headscarf mean anyway? It means she's against the Constitution. That's what it means. And obviously, no, it really has nothing at all to do with the content of the Constitution. It had no influence whatsoever in her decision on whether or not to wear this scarf. I mean, it has an impact on whether or not she is protected in choosing to do so. But no, this isn't like my anti-Constitution scarf. And it led to all sorts of interesting conversations, side conversations, in my view, that are very important to have. But I mean, beside the point I was trying to make, but also important, for instance, people pointing out, well, how many other religions involve head coverings for women? There is, it's worth noting, like, oh, even ones that you think are quote unquote real religions have plenty of instances of head coverings being worn. But so what? Because, everybody covers their head with something. And I'm actually looking at the side-by-side split screen photo that illustrated some of the tweets of Jeanine Pirro whining on her show, side by side with a shot of Congresswoman Omar in her hijab. Jeanine Pirro, like many of the Fox women, has a kind of a standard hairstyle thing going on, a helmet of hair, a hairspray helmet, as we used to call it. But now I've taken to calling it the hairspray hijab, because it actually looks quite a lot like, what's the difference here? This one's mohair and this one's human hair. It doesn't make any difference. It covers your head in more or less the same shape. And the Fox women's hairstyle is surrounding your head with a corona of hair. And it's this long and usually this color. Hers is the anomaly. It's not blonde. And it's flipped in at the ends so that it comes under the chin. And basically it's like a head wrap, but it's made of human hair. One part of it is attached to your head and you can't get rid of it. And you don't take it off when you get in the shower, which is what I assume that people who wear headscarves do. And but it doesn't look that much different, of course. You have your head wrapped in one kind of fiber or another. But I don't know. That's not the main point. My interest in the Jeanine Pirro thing was that she was, many people pointed out, she was making, in some ways, Ilhan Omar's point about how it's okay to accuse some people of having dual loyalties or hinting at that, but not okay for others. That was an interesting view of things. What occurred to me in Pirro's whining and worrying about Omar and Muslim women in particular was she was illustrating where in the bygone era the power of the anti-Semitic and even anti-Catholic tropes came up. That's what got Ilhan Omar in trouble last week, was everyone was saying that her comments about Israel were in fact anti-Semitic tropes and accusing American Jews in total, although she would say she was only speaking of certain activist AIPAC types, accusing them of having, and she didn't use the words dual loyalty, but hinting enough at it that it got people agitated about that possibility. And I saw earlier this morning the tweet of, James Surowiecki, I'm guessing at the pronunciation of his last name, author of The Wisdom of Crowds, among other things. And he had tweeted this, I saw it this morning. I don't know whether he tweeted it this morning. In fact, it would have been yesterday morning. Speaking of the Pirro segment here, that the irony here, he says, is that Pirro is a practicing Catholic. Why is that an irony? Because the slur she's making against Omar, that if she follows the Quran, she can't follow the Constitution, is remarkably similar to the arguments that were once made against Catholic politicians. And this is true. And we'll just read a little bit of his tweet thread before taking our break and then answering it after the break. He goes to the example of Al Smith running for president in 1928. Most people go first to JFK, but this goes all the way back. Al Smith, 1928. At that point, pundits argued that Catholic doctrine meant that he would have to defer to the church in settling matters of law. Less sophisticated critics just said he was going to be a puppet of the Vatican. Campaign flyers said that Smith was going to build a tunnel between Washington and Rome so that he could get his marching orders from the Vatican more easily. I don't think we've advanced all that much getting a tunnel to Moscow, but okay. Continuing with his tweet thread, when JFK ran for president, he was forced to defuse this charge from the start. So he declared, I am not the Catholic candidate for president, and felt the need to say explicitly that he and not the church would be making policy. Even so, anti-Catholicism was a big part of the campaign against Kennedy in states like West Virginia, Kentucky, and oddly, he says, Michigan. A group of Protestant ministers publicly committed to stopping the election of a Catholic president. And what Pirro is trying to sell then is just a version of a very old slur, the idea that anyone who's not a native-born Protestant, and that's what it comes down to. Oops, wait a second. I got to get the music started here. And not that easy to get the clicks to take when you just have the one thing working. What Pirro's trying to sell then is a version of just a very old slur, the idea that anyone who is not a native-born Protestant can't be relied upon to uphold American law, which is a very strange thing for an Italian-American Catholic to do. It is strange, and it's strange in a number of ways, and I have some more thoughts about that I'll share with you at the other side of this short break. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We're at a different point in the music, waiting for things to wind down. Oh, yes, okay, so here we are. We've gotten all the way through the initial reactions from James Surowiecki about Jeanine Pirro. What I thought was interesting was he begins his tweet thread, of course. The irony here is that Pirro is a practicing Catholic, and the slur she's making against Omar, that if she follows the Quran, she can't follow the Constitution, is remarkably similar to those once made against Catholic politicians. There is some irony in it, although I see a slightly different irony, I would say. I would say that, I began by saying that it's just as the Republican position, this was something we were talking about last week when we were discussing Omar, just as the Republican position on Israel has changed, you might try to say evolved, but I don't know. It's been sort of, it's a more abrupt change than evolution would suggest, a slow-moving, broad-based change. I think this was a radical, like a mutation more than anything else. But mutation is at the heart of evolution, true, but it has to catch on for that to be the case. Anyway, just as the Republican position on Israel has changed, using the same terminology as last week, from a sniffing disdain for Israel and opposition to loan guarantees, right? That's how I remember the Republican position when I was, growing up and becoming more politically aware. The Republican conservative position on Israel was one of, they're constantly after our money, which was a pretty interesting anti-Semitic trope in itself. And no, we shouldn't be guaranteeing loans for them. They're a bunch of weirdos and we got nothing to do with them and whatever. I mean, I guess they preferred the Israeli side in the Middle Eastern conflicts for some reason, but it wasn't clear exactly what that reason was. The reason given usually was, well, and it has lingered into today. It's mutated into a different, a slightly different view of the same thing, that it's the only democracy in the Middle East. And of course, well, things have changed quite dramatically in Israel as well, and you could question that very easily. But back in the day, it was a easy enough story to get away with, because there were at least occasionally ballots cast in elections in Israel, whereas that was very often not the case in the rest of the Middle East. Anyway, like I said, from the mid-'80s and maybe a little earlier through the mid-'90s, that was largely the Republican position, was that Israel was a drain on our resources, an annoyance in the Middle East, and that to the extent that we supported them, that mainstream, I guess, Protestant Republican politicians supported Israel at all, it was because, well, what the hell else are we going to do? I'm not happy with anybody there, but that's the only party to the Middle Eastern conflict with whom we have anything in common. And that evolved at some point into this now. We're strong supporters of Israel. But I think, I don't know, maybe it's best to follow this formulation of the way I put it this morning without elaboration. Just as this Republican position on Israel changed from opposition to loan guarantees and their annoying people to this idea of support for Israel. I'm an Israel supporter, I don't just tolerate Israel. I support Israel. And that support has two main bases, some of which derive from the same place and overlap depending on what kind of conservative Republican you are. Either from dominionist apocalyptic vision, where you say, I'm an evangelical dominionist and I believe that a conflagration in the Middle East will bring about the rapture and the return of Jesus and all the biblical mythology that goes with it. And so therefore, and part of the dominionist understanding is that Armageddon, that apocalypse, is triggered by the establishment of a dominant Israel in what they, I guess, refer to as a greater Israel, a greater Judea even, occupying all the territory in current modern-day Israel and around it. And that this, maybe the conflict even that leads to this greater occupation of even more territory under the Israeli flag, leads to this conflagration that eventually leads to Armageddon as well. Slightly different strain of it, if you're not overtly dominionist, is that Israel, I support Israel because Israel has a conflict, with its Muslim neighbors, and because that conflict has taken the form occasionally of what we view as terrorism, that kind that even regular Americans from the heartland can recognize as terrorism. They don't recognize it as terrorism when it's their neighbors making pipe bombs to blow up government buildings. They recognize it as terrorism when Muslim people attempt to blow up American or American-affiliated targets. And because the Israelis are constantly fighting against Muslim terrorism, and so are we are natural allies. Now, if in the end we see all of our allies burned in a great conflagration, which leads to the establishment of a kingdom on earth that puts us at the pinnacle, it's just one of the things that happens. That's history for you. Can't really help it if God hates you people. And that's sort of how they approach things. So Republicans have changed their view of Israel, and now they support Israel based on this crazy idea either that it's going to blow itself up and bring Jesus back, or at the very least, I hate Muslim terrorists, and so do Israelis, so we're natural allies. Similarly, and in the same time period, I would say, the Republican position on Catholicism has changed from ew, Catholics, they're so ethnic, to wait a minute, as an evangelical, I am rabidly anti-abortion, and these people, these Catholics, also are supposed to be anti-abortion. I can get along with Catholics. Catholics are the best non-real Christians we have because they're rabidly anti-abortion. Why? Because their church says so, and so therefore they make good allies. In fact, we'll put a label on them here. Catholics, if you get a smart Catholic who's politically ambitious, that's a person you should put on the Supreme Court, because they'll vote your way on the one thing we care about, abortion. Why? Because Catholic Church. That's the real irony, if you think about it, or if you're me and you think about it. The real irony is that Jews and Catholics are now acceptable to Republicans. In fact, strongly preferred in some ways. Not for, anything like personal or being around me, but in a political sense. The real irony is that Jews and Catholics are now acceptable to Republicans. Why? They are acceptable, or I guess I should say when. They are acceptable so long as, and this is the big irony, so long as they actually are dogmatically devoted to playing the parts that are assigned to them in supporting Republican ideology. In other words, to Republicans, Jews are Jews equal Israel supporters. Whatever that's supposed to mean. Of course, they've got a skewed view of what Israel is, but Jews are Israel supporters. Why? Or for what purpose? Do they agree with Israel support? They are Israel supporters, and therefore, in their mind, anti-Muslim, because that's how you support Israel. Israel's anti-Muslim. And in many ways, the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu sits atop Israeli government makes it true. They are. So, that's not what Israeli people as a whole are supposed to be about. But Benjamin Netanyahu makes it hard to deny. And he's been prime minister since forever. And that, too, his prime ministership and the dominance of the conservative parties in Israel also overlaps with this same period. So for Republicans, Jews, they're supposed to love Israel because something. Somewhere I heard that there's an obligation for Jews to support Israel, and Israel is constantly fighting with its Muslim terrorists, in these guys' minds and Republican minds, Muslim terrorist neighbors, so we're for Israel. And while at the same time, Catholics are slaves to their church, which opposes abortion and are therefore reliable anti-abortion voters. Jews and Catholics who deviate from Israel support / Muslim fighting, or Catholics who deviate from anti-abortion voting, they are enemies to Republicans. They are un-American. They are traitors to their race. And for Jews, they certainly believe that they're a race. And they might even believe the same thing of Catholics, for all I know. Although they might try to argue out of that, and they would have a good point in doing so. But they view Jews and Catholics who aren't cleaving to their orthodoxies as traitors to those orthodoxies, and they absolutely will goy-splain Israel to Jews and whatever terminology there might be to cover I don't think there is anything that non-Catholics just call or the Catholics call non-Catholics. But they will church-splain Catholicism to Catholics. Trump, and one of the responses I got to this thread was Trump scolding the Pope over questions that the Pope, was openly struggling with as head of his church. Like, this is really was kind of amazing. I wonder if I can even dig that up. And it's in here somewhere in my, in the responses. But, yeah, great headline of Trump saying it was disgusting. He used the word disgusting, that the Pope was questioning his faith. I mean, that's what people of faith do all the time, is they question and struggle with it. And Trump, who has no religious ties at all, imagine him telling the Pope, that guy's disgusting for having a theological debate with himself. What kind of wording is that? He just thinks he'd lay that on anybody. But for a long time, late 90s, early 2000s, Catholicism and converts to Catholicism were like the hottest properties in Republican political circles. You got to be converting to Catholic. That's how you show everybody how serious you are about your anti-abortion stance. We got to snap some of these people up and make them part of our party. And to me, like I said, the real irony here is that it is the very unswerving dedication to religious dogma as Republicans view it, and as Republicans believe Jews and Catholics are supposed to have, that make Jews and Catholics acceptable to Republicans. I support Israel, even though there are a bunch of Jews, because Israel, I think, is dedicated to fighting its Muslim neighbors who are all terrorists. I believe that to the extent that it looks to me like Israelis believe that because Netanyahu and others, then I'm pro-Israel. And to the extent that Jews, even Israeli Jews, criticize that, well, you're not really one of them. Who are you to say this? You're not, you can't. It's not up to you. That's not who gets to define it. Similarly with Catholics. If they're anti-abortion, good for them. I love them. That's why we love Catholics. That's why Catholics are part of our conservative Republican circles. And people who say, I'm a practicing Catholic, but I think it's wrong for them to, dabble in worldly politics, even for the cause of being anti-abortion, are heretical. Even though you're Protestant, you don't get to say when a Catholic is heretical, I guess. But that to me was the great irony of it. That they love to attack them for having dual loyalties, and then that didn't work. And now it's like, well, because they have dual loyalties, I love them, because their loyalty could be interpreted as meaning that they're loyal to this ideological position I have and support. So yeah, that's kind of where they're stuck. To Republicans, Jews are Israel supporters, and so am I, because anti-Islam. Catholics are anti-abortion, so am I, so I like them for that. And to the extent that you don't exhibit this dual loyalty, that you aren't a Jew who automatically supports Israel and so therefore is anti-Muslim, or are a Catholic who isn't devoted to the positions dictated from the Vatican and therefore isn't anti-abortion, are useless people. So to me, that's the great irony of it, that all of a sudden, when I can't attack you for having dual loyalties, I will attack you for not having dual loyalties. So you can't win with these guys, and you shouldn't look for their approval in anything, and you shouldn't allow them to, certainly shouldn't allow them to define whether or not you are a traitor to your church or your religion or whatever. And don't take any advice on Israel or Catholicism from them. They have no idea. That's, I guess, where I'll leave it for the moment. But I thought that was an even more interesting irony than the fact that Pirro is an Italian Catholic. It doesn't matter to her. She's a Republican first. And that's sad. And also proof that her formula is stupid, right? I mean, she's doing the work of the Republican Party before she's doing the work of the Catholic Church, despite the fact that she's a Catholic Republican. So there's your answer. no such thing as dual loyalty. And because there isn't, anybody who doesn't exhibit it is also a traitor because reasons. I don't know. It's a very weird combination, and you should be wary of being around it or influenced by it in any way. Okay, moving on here. Let's see what else I have put aside in pocket, and if it won't be too disruptive, I'd like to do it from the computer this time. I guess we'll make another note of this because it's one, current, and two, important and a good change of pace. Washington Post piece here today from Michael Scherer, who writes under the headline, I'm just sort of scrolling down to see how long this thing is here, but it's pretty lengthy. Writing a piece under the headline of court packing, and that's enclosed in scare quotes, court packing ideas get attention from Democrats. So it's a little bit of a 2020 story and a little bit of a ongoing judicial appointments story. And it's not such a terrible segue from the previous topic, and we'll find a point for making that connection once we start with the article. The once remote idea of adding more justices to the Supreme Court to change its ideological bent is prompting growing discussion within the Democratic Party, creating a new frontier for presidential candidates looking to display their liberal credentials. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, I don't know if we got to mention this the other day, who recently decided against running for president, became the latest figure to embrace an expansion of the 9-member court in recent talks at Yale Law School and Columbia University. He questioned the validity of the current court, given Senate Republicans' refusal to vote on Judge Merrick Garland after President Barack Obama nominated him to the Supreme Court in March of 2016. The seat was ultimately filled, as you know, by Neil Gorsuch. Given the Merrick Garland situation, the question of legitimacy is one that I think we should talk about, Holder said. We should be talking even about expanding the number of people who serve on the Supreme Court if there is a Democratic president and a Congress that would do that. His comments come as activists launch an organized effort to prod the presidential contenders to say publicly they're open to such ideas. Kirsten Gillibrand has called adding justices or imposing term limits on them interesting ideas I would have to think more about. Pete Buttigieg, the Maltese Falcon, I don't know, man, the mayor of South Bend, of course, who is exploring a presidential campaign and exploring it by conducting one, I guess, has responded to questions by inviting consideration of either adding justices or rotating them on and off the court. He has also discussed the new 15-justice structure for the court, 5 Democratic appointees, 5 Republican appointees, and 5 chosen by the other 10. Interesting. Conservatives have long been galvanized by the promise of moving the Supreme Court to the right, so much so that they were willing to accept Catholics in their fold, making it a sometimes significant, that part I added, of course, making it a sometimes significant factor in their voting decisions, always. Now, liberals, angered by the aggressive GOP push to remake the federal courts, are becoming equally impassioned, prompting a discussion of far-reaching ideas for remaking the nation's highest legal body. I said there was a segue in here somewhere. I hinted at it just a moment ago. I got to thinking, Gorsuch is kind of a weird exception of sorts to this, but not entirely. What I mean is, when I say that Republicans came to embrace Catholics and label them as, if you get a smart one, you can put one, these are the people you put on the Supreme Court. When was the last Supreme Court justice nominated by a Republican president who wasn't affiliated in some way during their history with the Catholic Church, with whom they remained satisfied as a choice until the day they retired? Because I was going to say, Gorsuch, you get to pick your own religion. That's the way it is. Gorsuch apparently is I guess the closest you can come and say he's Episcopalian now. I guess he was raised Catholic, and he married an Episcopalian woman, an Anglican woman, a British woman who's Church of England. And like lots of people thought, I just, for the sake of harmony at home and just connection between the two of us, I would like to, let's all go to church together, and I'll just be Episcopalian here in the United States. And it's a relatively simple transition to do. I mean, I guess of all the various denominations, for historical reasons, the Anglican Church is not that far off from the practices of the Catholic Church and whatever. Even if it had been an extraordinarily difficult transition, I am sure that Gorsuch would happily have made it, because that makes him happy in his family, I'm sure. So anyway, Catholic in upbringing, and then of course went to Georgetown Prep along with Brett Kavanaugh. And so aside from, I mean, if you put aside Gorsuch because he was raised Catholic and went to a Jesuit high school, how far back do you have to go for a Republican nominee who isn't Catholic? You hit Souter first, and that's why the caveat of, are you satisfied with the nomination all the way through the game? No, the Republicans became disenchanted very, very quickly with Souter, who wasn't Catholic. And why did they become dissatisfied with Souter? He was a traitor to their cause because of abortion. I mean, the reason they got upset with him was, well, he didn't toe the line on abortion. And now we got to have Catholics, because we think, because we're dumb, will toe the line on abortion. Of course, you pick the right Catholics, they will toe the line. That is to say, people who are anti-abortion and say so will generally stay anti-abortion and not change their minds. Although, there are some exceptions. Sometimes people get guilted into it or believe things like, oh, I believe in the current state of the law and stare decisis, and I'm not going to, and I really mean it when I say it at my hearings. Occasionally you get people like that. But otherwise, it's like Catholics all the way back to until Reagan, where this evolution began with saying, yeah, well, maybe we're okay with Catholics after all. They'll do our bidding on abortion. So anyway, yes, so now we find ourselves with a court that I think I read the other day. I think there's been 14 Catholic justices in the history of the Supreme Court. And there are, 6 on the court now? Or would we say 5 if we don't count Gorsuch? But the entirety of the court is now either Catholic or raised Catholic or Jewish. And that's it. Are there any? I mean, Gorsuch is the Protestant on the Supreme Court, and he was raised Catholic and went to Jesuit high school. So I don't know. It's an odd transition from 14 across the entirety of history to a majority of the court in 20 years. Okay, nothing going on there. There's no Republican program to ride on the backs of Catholics to their preferred ideological outcome. Wink, wink. Conservatives, let's see. Oh, we left off reading this. The concept of expanding the Supreme Court, back to the Washington Post article, like the phrase court packing itself, fell into lengthy disrepute after 1937 when President Franklin Roosevelt, frustrated that conservative justices were blocking New Deal programs he considered to be crucial for the country, sought to add 6 friendlier justices, prompting an outcry even from allies. Some liberal activists and scholars say the idea now merits a new look. They view the GOP's refusal to consider Garland as tantamount to stealing a Supreme Court seat, and they contend that the Senate paid insufficient attention to the sexual misconduct allegations against Justice Brett Kavanaugh in last year's confirmation hearing, which he forcefully denied. Republicans, these activists fear, have in essence created a judicial buffer against any future liberal agenda if Democrats recapture the White House and Congress. That's at the heart of it. Of course, Democrats cannot sit back and accept the status quo of a partisan Republican 5-seat majority for the next 30 years, said Brian Fallon, a former advisor to presidential candidate Hillary Clinton and to minority leader, Chuck Schumer, who now runs the advocacy group, just to screw things up a little bit more, demand justice. We don't consider those 2 seats that Trump has filled to be legitimate. And that's what drives the sentiment on, I guess, so-called court packing now. So interesting. I think we can probably leave off with the article at this point, just noting that it is getting a second look. The idea that court packing is bad and it has been rejected as somehow unconstitutional because it was once rejected on political grounds. Similarly, we find ourselves questioning the idea that a sitting president can't be indicted, even though occasionally other people who were said to not be indictable turned out to be indictable because politics demanded it. All these things can change. Interesting transition. We'll be right back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal. Except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's change directions a little bit here. I've got a couple of other stories that I'd like to touch on, and some of which we'll dive into and never get out of, but just a brief note on this somewhat weird, funny / worrisome Donald Trump story from Travis Geddes at Raw Story. It's on videotape. MSNBC's Morning Joe, which they watch so I don't have to, stunned by Trump's obvious lie, another one, about Tim Apple. You remember this last week when he had Tim, what's his name? Cook, the CEO of Apple, to the White House for, I don't know why, some stupid technology event or another. I don't keep track of those things. But referring to him as Tim Apple, which, on the one hand, it may just be, as some said, Trump can't conceive of a company that isn't named after its founder, and so therefore he must be Tim Apple. Or, I just sort of attributed that one to, well, that's just, whatever. That's not an important one. I don't think that he really thinks to this day that his name is Tim Apple. He just slipped. His name's Tim Cook, and I forgot, like I did. What's his name? Tim Cook? Something or other. He's from Apple, and he just, misspoke and called him Tim Apple. Fine. But you know how the president is, right? When he says, as Daniel Dale has pointed out, his technique when he misstates things is not to simply say, oh, I'm sorry, I misstated it. I meant to say so-and-so, like even referring to people by name. And so DJ here, whose name is also CJ, he told me I could call him both, CJ and DJ. It's not that I screwed up and called him DJ when his name is CJ, or vice versa, whatever the real story was. This was a real thing, right? Referring to somebody at a speech. And DJ, he said I could call him either one. It's fine. He just says wrong thing, realizes it's the wrong thing, or right thing, and then goes out of his way to say either one. It could be either one. No, it's just one. He does this with Tim Apple, too, although he takes a slightly different tack here. MSNBC's Joe Scarborough was astonished that President Donald Trump insisted to donors he spoke to this weekend at Pervalago. He insisted to donors that he hadn't called Apple CEO Tim Cook by the wrong name because the flub was, and this is why why Scarborough was astonished. It's because the flub was recorded on widely seen video. The president mistakenly called the tech executive Tim Apple, which prompted days of jokes. But Trump denied making the error on Friday during a speech to Republican donors at his stupid club, which shouldn't be happening. It never happened. That's what he says. So in a move that stunned even his own donors, President Trump denies what you just heard, said Morning Joe co-host Mika Brzezinski after rolling video of the mistake. It never happened, Scarborough said. Don't believe your eyes. That's what he says Trump is telling people. He insists that he said Tim Cook's name correctly. And it's just fake news media playing a big trick on everyone, Brzezinski said. Added to the sad, steady march toward 10,000 lies in office, literally that number, that's where we are. Scarborough said some of the president's supporters still don't believe he lies, although there's plain evidence in this case that Trump was dishonest. I love when people say, oh, he doesn't lie. Give me an example, Scarborough said. You have it there on videotape, and his donors were saying this weekend at Mar-a-Lago, it's on videotape. It's on videotape, yet he calls it fake. Again, there are those who believe what they believe. Let those who have ears hear. And I guess they played the tape. But that's what's going on. That's the level of deception that's going on from Trump and Trump supporters doing to themselves. I guess they believe that the media faked up and doctored this videotape, and they took the word Apple and spliced it in and said, look, he called him Tim Apple. Now, why anybody would spend the time doing that, I have no idea. But that's where we are, and Trump supporters are willing to believe it. Okay, well, they'll believe any lie, I guess, that you tell them, including this one. File this one under, again, never take their word about anything when it comes to documents or requires documents. They don't know what they're doing, and they usually don't file the paperwork. And if they do file the paperwork, and someone asks them about it and it's bad, they will deny that the paperwork exists. But it does exist. That's what the headline says. Betsy Woodruff reporting for, where are we? The Daily Beast. It exists. DOJ finds letter ordering scrutiny of Uranium One, Hillary Clinton. Then Attorney General Jeff Sessions, actually, wrote the letter on November 22nd, 2017 for Utah U.S. Attorney John Huber. Read it here. Here, it's an exclusive. You can't read it elsewhere. Or at least you couldn't at the time this was published on the 9th of the month. After it claimed no such document existed, and it's important how they claimed it and in what context they claimed it. After it, the DOJ, claimed no such document existed, the Justice Department just unearthed a letter Matt Whitaker, remember him, delivered to the U.S. Attorney in Utah, directing a review of how the department handled the Clinton Foundation and the Uranium One issues. Remember, they're still working on lock her up. Then Attorney General Jeff Sessions wrote the letter on November 22nd, 2017, for Utah U.S. Attorney John Huber. Matt Whitaker, who was Sessions' chief of staff at the time, emailed the letter, to Huber that day, writing, as we discussed, emailed the letter. I guess as an attachment. He also sent Huber, and I don't know whether it's Huber or Huber, Huber, a copy of a letter the Justice Department's Congressional Affairs Chief sent to the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee on November 13th of that year. The existence of a letter documenting Sessions' directive that the DOJ revisit probes of Trump's top political foe is a surprise, because a department lawyer said in court last year that senior officials insisted it didn't exist. The liberal nonprofit American Oversight obtained the letter through a Freedom of Information Act request they filed on November 22nd, 2017, the same day Whitaker emailed Sessions' letter to Huber. The request asked for documentation of the directions Sessions gave Huber about the review of the Clinton investigations. After DOJ failed to produce any written directions, American Oversight sued. And on November 16, 2018, senior counsel in the Office of Information Policy, Vanessa Brinkman, who handles FOIA requests, said a lawyer in Sessions' office told her no such letter existed. That lawyer spoke with Huber and Whitaker, she said, in a declaration filed in federal court, and then told her that when the Attorney General directed Mr. Huber to evaluate these matters, no written guidance or directives were issued to Mr. Huber in connection with this directive, either by the Attorney General or by other senior leadership office staff. That wasn't correct. On Wednesday of last week, a DOJ lawyer told American Oversight that they had found the document that kicked off Huber's work. The letter, which American Oversight provided to the Daily Beast, is consistent with what the DOJ's Chief of Legislative Affairs has told Congress, that Huber is scrutinizing the sale of a Canadian uranium mining company with interests in the United States to Rosatom. I don't know where they put the emphasis there. Is it Rosatom or Rosatom? A Russian state-owned company. Republicans have long alleged that then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton declined to oppose the deal because of contributions to the Clinton Foundation. The DOJ hasn't brought any charges related to the foundation or the transaction. Some Hill Republicans and conservative media commentators have long argued this is because the department hasn't sufficiently investigated it. They've called for the appointment of a special counsel to scrutinize the transaction. Sessions didn't bite. Instead, he directed Huber to review what the department had done regarding the matter. Huber's work has drawn significant interest, but unlike Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian influence during the 2016 election, there is scant public information about what fruits, if any, it has borne. Some Republicans say Huber's work is too little too late. Democrats, meanwhile, argue it's evidence of the Trump administration weaponizing law enforcement to target its political rivals. Lock her up was just wrong at campaign rallies, and it's even worse coming from the Department of Justice, said Austin Evers, who heads American Oversight. Even after this long, it's still deeply shocking to see the black and white proof that Jeff Sessions caved to President Trump's worst authoritarian impulses and ordered a wide-ranging investigation of his political opponents based on demands from Congress instead of the facts and the law. It strains credulity to believe that the Justice Department didn't know about this letter when they swore under penalty of perjury that it didn't exist. You don't exactly forget about a formal directive to investigate Hillary Clinton signed by Jeff Sessions, he added. The fact that they only found it the same week Matthew Whitaker was heading for the exits makes it hard to see DOJ's previous denial as anything but a deliberate attempt to conceal the extent to which President Trump's authoritarian demands were being put into action. The authoritarian instinct in the Trump administration needs to be investigated. Sessions and Whitaker shouldn't escape accountability by skipping town. Reached for comment, the DOJ spokesperson said Huber's review is still underway, and then embedded in this article is the letter from the Attorney General, and so you can see it for yourself. And it's pretty amazing, quite honestly. Just not so much for the content of the letter, which is amazing in its own right, as the idea that it's there, it exists, and the department is even willing to go into court and swear it doesn't when it does. And there's really pretty good reason to believe that they knew it at the time as well. So I don't know why they would later uncover it. Maybe they really didn't. Maybe they lose track of these things. I don't know. But even if it's sworn to in court, it could still be absolutely 100% opposite of true with this administration. And there's no admission of fault here. There's no admission that, we did finally find it. It's just sort of, we swore that it didn't exist, and kind of does. Just poof. Done. Okay. Well, never believe anything with respect to proof and paperwork with these guys. All right. There's the Mother Jones article about the influence peddling among by Cindy Yang and others, and that's a pretty amazing thing. If you haven't read it, I don't know that our time is best spent combing through it today, although there's an awful lot that can be mined out of it, and we probably should spend some time on it. I guess I'll note for the record, thanks to our listener and Twitter follower and friend Sponson, who sent me this interesting tweet. Poor Canada, now tearing itself apart in many of the same ways, and we've been doing it here. I guess the spread of Pizzagate culture to Canadian politics as well. He sent me this note from CBC Politics. I'll have to open it up and read the article in order to know who I'm talking about here, or be told who I'm talking about here. Scheer, about whom I know nothing, and he is federal conservative leader Andrew Scheer. Scheer says he didn't hear question about Clinton Pizzagate lie, thank you for using the term, during town hall. What's the story? Last Thursday, during a town hall meeting, a questioner linked the Clinton Foundation, this time to child sacrifice. And I guess Andrew Scheer is accused of just letting that roll and letting that lie without saying anything about it. Conservative Andrew Scheer said today, and that was Friday, I guess, that he didn't hear a question about a town hall at a town hall event about an infamous and widely debunked conspiracy theory connecting former presidential candidate Hillary Clinton to a child sex ring. At one point during the event in Kitchener, Ontario, I hope I have that right, but whatever, a member of the audience rose to ask Scheer a 2-minute question, oh my, touching on several subjects, including immigration funding and international aid. He then linked Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to the mythical conspiracy theory known as Pizzagate, which gained traction around the 2016 United States presidential election. Trudeau, he said, gave $600 million to the Clinton Foundation. The Clinton Foundation is part of a child trafficking and child sacrifice ring. If you study it, it's in the Pizzagate, he said, if you study it. The PM, if he knows about the foundation, should he be in jail for that one? Also, he needs to pay back the $600 million plus his trips to the Canadians. I don't know what they're supposed to mean. Those comments, I don't know. And I guess Scheer lets it roll off without commentary. The conspiracy theory accuses Clinton and you know the one, of running a child sex ring out of Comet Ping Pong, a pizza shop in Washington, D.C. Pizzagate is often cited in discussions about the real-life dangers of false news online. In 2016, in North Carolina, a man fired an assault rifle inside the restaurant as he attempted to self-investigate the unfounded internet rumors about Democrats hiding child sex slaves there. While no one was injured in that incident, a U.S. judge told gunman Edgar Welch that his actions literally left psychological wreckage. Welch was sentenced to 4 years in prison. Pizzagate, which the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia has called a fictitious online conspiracy theory, is largely believed to have gained momentum after WikiLeaks released emails from Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta, mentioning pizza parties and a fundraiser at the Comet restaurant. Some online communities theorized it was code for something more heinous. Well, you know how that goes. Sure. Anyway, sorry that it has spread to Canada. Let's see. And in his response to the town hall questioner, Scheer did not say the Pizzagate theory was false, although he did pick up on the Clinton Foundation angle about Trudeau spending taxpayers' money on what he called personal projects. Yes, well, I appreciate your concerns on this, he replied. That's pretty general. I can assure you that when you look at where Justin Trudeau has spent money, it's clear that a huge sum of the dollars that he has taken from Canadian taxpayers has gone to his own personal projects. Now, what's happening? Did he direct Canadian government money to the to the foundation? Is that what it's supposed to be? The Liberal government has pledged $20 million over 5 years to the Clinton Health Access Initiative, which is affiliated with the foundation. According to the Global Affairs website, the money is helping the initiative improve access to sexual and reproductive health services for women and girls in Nigeria. Okay. Well, very interesting. I guess, again, apologies for leaking our craziness into Canada, but we got to keep an eye on what's happening up there to some extent. And there was another one that I put aside the other day. Can I find this one quickly? Let's see. I don't think it's too far. There we are. NBC News reporting the other day, a somewhat more serious issue, I suppose. I haven't seen any developments on it. Justin Trudeau vowed to change politics. NBC News' headline reads, "Now a scandal may doom him." What is the scandal? Will it doom him? I don't know. Subheader here. A quote, "It turns out women really aren't just like men and aren't necessarily afraid to stand by their beliefs." One pundit wrote about the crisis captivating Canada, is it? That's tarnished its prime minister. It's hard to know what captivates Canadians unless they tell us. Yulia Talmazan is the writer of this March 6th piece. We might as well just catch up, even though it's not U.S. politics. Got to keep a close eye on the neighbors. When Justin Trudeau was elected Canadian Prime Minister 4 years ago, he became an instant international celebrity and media darling. The charismatic and photogenic politician made headlines for everything from his feminist views to his tattoos, that sort of rhymes, and past jobs, which include being a bungee jumping coach. Jump. Tie this. Jump. I'm sure there's more to it than that. While his father, Pierre Trudeau, governed the country for the vast majority of 1968 till 1984, the chances of Justin Trudeau winning a second term this year appears to be dimming amid the biggest crisis of his political career. The scandal has already cost Trudeau his top aide and best friend, as well as two of his highest profile female cabinet ministers. Here's a look, anyway, not necessarily the definitive look, at what happened and what might happen next. What is at the heart of the scandal? Please tell me. I'm not Canadian. I don't know. In a serious blow to Trudeau, which also rhymes, sadly, 47, thank you, a second member of his cabinet resigned on Monday, saying she had lost confidence in how his Liberal government had dealt with a scandal that has dominated the news for nearly a month, without my noticing. Treasury Board President Jane Philpott, in overall charge of government spending, expressed her unhappiness about the government's response to allegations that former Justice Minister and Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould was inappropriately pressured to avoid the criminal prosecution of a major engineering company. There's a letter, or a tweet embedded here, which has a letter attached to it. This, a note of resignation from Jane Philpott. Critics say there may have been improper political meddling in a criminal case. Oh no, that's bad. That's spreading to you guys too. Philpott is a close friend of Wilson-Raybould. I don't know whether it's Raybould or Bould, but it's Bould, and so you know how it is with Canadians and British English superfluously including U's that don't necessarily have to be there. But Wilson-Raybould, who resigned on February 12th after she was unexpectedly demoted the previous month. Wilson-Raybould said last week she was convinced that her refusal to help Montreal-based SNC Lavalin, the firm accused of paying bribes for government contracts in Libya, of all places, was behind the demotion. She testified that Trudeau and senior members of his government pushed an option that would include SNL Lavalin paying reparations, but not our kind, repaying reparations for this bribery scheme, but avoiding trial. However, Wilson-Raybould also said she did not think any laws had been broken. Now, if convicted, SNC Lavalin would be banned from receiving any federal government business for a decade. The company is a major employer in Quebec, with about 3,400 employees in the province, 9,000 across Canada, and more than 50,000 worldwide. Wilson-Raybould testified that Trudeau, who represents part of Quebec, had expressed concerns about those jobs being lost. Gerald Butts, Trudeau's closest advisor and longtime friend, also resigned last week. He denied that he or anyone in Trudeau's office pressured Wilson-Raybould and is due to provide a rebuttal to her testimony at a parliamentary justice committee on Wednesday. Laurie Turnbull, the director of the School of Public Administration at Canada's Dalhousie University. I don't know anything about Canadian universities. I'm woefully ignorant about Canada. I apologize, everybody. Well, she wrote in the Globe and Mail that Philpott's resignation from the cabinet was nothing short of catastrophic for the government. Philpott did not mince words. She does not want to resign, but she has to, given the moral space between her and the government. Why is the latest resignation so damaging? Philpott was widely regarded as one of the most respected and competent ministers in Trudeau's government. A physician by trade, she previously served as Minister of Health and Minister of Indigenous Services. Philpott said the alleged efforts by politicians and officials to pressure Wilson-Raybould had raised serious concerns, and she quit in solidarity with her. Laurie Williams, associate professor in the Department of Economics, Justice and Policy Studies at Mount Royal University in Calgary, easier to pronounce, said Philpott's principled resignation was a significant blow for Trudeau, which again rhymes. She was one of the government's most effective advocates, and she resigned because she no longer felt she could defend all her government has done. Williams said, boy, it seems almost quaint compared with our problems, but I guess they're real people running a real government up there, and they have shame. Well, there's a lot more to it, and seems interesting. I guess I should ask at this point an open call for Canadians to send any reports on it that they think are better, more informative, more accurate, or tell a different story if necessary. I don't know. I just thought we should catch up with this stuff in the closing minutes of the show. Seemed like good use of the time to be aware of what's happening in a major ally and neighboring country. All right. Anything else that we might be able to shoehorn in or that is of extreme importance before handing the microphone over to Justice? And I don't rightly know. I have to go and check on my manual version of Twitter, my tweet deck not working and making it difficult to check the KITM hashtag this morning. Maybe I can make a quick look at that through my manual Twitter check here. Let's see. Well, they're all from some time ago, but there was lots of commentary along the way in the morning. And let's see. Okay. Maybe we'll have to save this for tomorrow because we're almost out of time. But I do see now that I guess this would have been last week that Karen was asking, saying it would be interesting to hear a little about the congressional referral to law enforcement process. When are they typically made, and are referrals subject to rules, or can they be done by any member or committee? I've seen them come from GOP chairs, but not often by Dems. Yeah, good question, and I think it differs based on what charges you're talking about. We'll have to give that some thought and see if that enters back into the news and gives us another hook to consider that. But I think that basically, that's really all we've got in terms of time for today. And our warnings are going off. Now would be a good time to tell you, if there's anything we missed, how much of it will be covered by Justice Putnam on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy coming up next here on Netroots Radio. Let's see if I can keep the music close at hand. With just a few clicks, I can start reading through this. Here's what he's got on tap for today. Ilhan Omar at the top of the list here. Ilhan Omar's religious right to wear a hijab ends where Jeanine Pirro's racist Islamophobia begins. All right, well, more commentary on that, and really, it's such a highly nuanced situation, really, that there's plenty of room, and I'm glad he'll be taking that up and taking it in a different direction. in the program to come. On the rest of the menu, Trump's National Golf Club at Washington, D.C., I guess that's the one out here in Virginia, has been illegally chopping down, yes, this is a good point, chopping down and then dumping protected trees in the Potomac River. I really appreciate that. That's been fantastic. It's only drinking water for some of you downstream. They've been doing this for a long time, but I guess on a renewed kick. Basically, they think the sweeping river views are what people are at the Trump Golf Club for, as opposed to proximity to the president. And trees only ruin it. Now, an added touch that they dump the trees into the Potomac River and choke it up with that as well. Okay, the top Air Force official who slammed Trump's Space Force suddenly quits, or at least so we think. Last Friday, the news was everybody thought she quit, but they hadn't seen any documentation on it. Trump's officials won't talk to Congress about the sexual abuse of the kids that they stole. But you and I keep talking about that, and so will Justice bring that up next as well. He's not afraid of it. After his break, moving on to the chef's table, where the good stuff happens, where the trial of Loujain al-Hathloul, oh my God, I've murdered that name, one of nearly a dozen prominent Saudi Arabian women's rights activists detained since last year, begins on Wednesday. That gives us 2 days to get the pronunciation right.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
I have a sneaky suspicion that Justice chooses his stories based on the difficulty of the pronunciation of the names involved, just to tease me by sending me these things. There is more, with more difficult names. The leading Rwandan opposition politician, Victoire Ingabire, oh my goodness, also has been found, oh my God, he's dead and you did this to me? R.I.P.